Good evening, everyone. Thank you. This could be a bifurcated issue to where I talk about the system as well as talking about my son. So I'm going to work from back to front right now because 4 weeks ago I was sitting beside my son. He was unconscious at Virginia Beach General Hospital. There were hoses and IVs all over him. He didn't know I was there. Basically, over the years, because of the blind eye of the court system, which we mentioned, and obsessive parental alienation, my son masked his behavior by the use of heroin. He's a recovering addict right now. This basically started, to the best of my knowledge, and I only learned of this a few months ago in therapy with a very good doctor that he's seeing. I didn't know for years, but I knew that there was something wrong on the times that he visited, but guardian ad litem's judges, they paid no attention to this. I saw his behavior change. I saw his physiological, exterior change. It was awful, but he had been dabbling with this for, I guess, 7 years, and it culminated to this point a month ago. It was quite sad. In the interim, in therapy sessions, which again, I just learned, that my son at his mother's house had tried to commit suicide when he was 16 by IV barbiturates and he drowned. I did try to tell guardian ad litem's and judges this, and I was called a picky parent. Now, one of the things that we didn't address here is that there's gender bias in the system. Richard Gardner stated at the time that he wrote the book that gender bias occurs primarily 80-20, meaning women are favored 80% of the time, and 20% of the time, I guess you would say that men are summarily dismissed. I don't really think that that's changed a whole lot. We'll stay on my son for a minute before I go on to the legal system. My son was taken from his home without warning. Now that's a wonderful term. I've ruminated over that term ever since he was taken. I'm an older parent, and I grew up with an expression called kidnapping. I was the primary parent in my son's life. I was the one that asked for children. When I approached my ex-wife and I said I wanted children, she says, if you want a child, you better find someone else. And so every morning at 2 a.m. I would get up and I would feed my child. When he couldn't sleep, I would take him for car rides. The day before he was taken without warning, because a judge told me that's what I should say in this politically correct era, my son and I went to the MacArthur Memorial. We always did everything together. I dressed him up in a cute little suit, and he had a wonderful time. I took him to school every morning. The next day, I had an errand to run. It was an errand planned by my ex-wife, a conscious behavior, and my son was gone. I did not see my son for a month. I finally found my son, went into the courtroom, and this wonderful judge who had adjudicated traffic tickets before he decided to rule on families, so it made him ever so knowledgeable about psychology and psychiatry. He said, is he with the mother? Yes, he's with the mother. Well, that's where he stays because boys or children in general need their mother. My lawyer and I looked at each other and we were just, my God, couldn't believe this. We were just basically dismissed out. My ex-wife was so empowered by that, even though that there was a visitation schedule in place, I did not see him for another month. So of course I called the attorney because lawyers are going to save everyone. We established another court date. She absolutely ran the show. There was no, she worked with impunity. Let's just put it that way, and it went on for years. So it was very spotty seeing my child. He was enrolled in the school down the street from me, John B. Dye, which was #1 in the state of Virginia. I got a call from John B. Dye in first grade. They said, your son has just been taken from school. I couldn't believe it. I made all sorts of phone calls, went by their house, gone again. You know the story by this point. I spent more money. Now I'm in the poorhouse, but I'm rich in heart. But at the time I had the money to spend on attorneys. Went to the attorney. No, I heard at that particular point in time, and some of you men will relate to this if you've gone through similar situations, I heard all schools are the same, what does it matter? Well, what does it matter is this child grew up in a good neighborhood and he wanted to be with his friends because a psychosocial background is very important to the development of a child. So he's in a new environment with new people. You could start seeing the devastation that was happening to my son. Nothing from the court system. So Basically what we learned here from the court system is that, guardian ad litems, sorry, Ms. Phillips, but they're not psychologists. There are 2 states in the United States to where they say we want guardian ad litems to have a basic psychology background, preferably, higher than a Bachelor of Science, and that's Florida and Massachusetts. Why are only 2 states of this great union? Yes, sir.
It's the money.
Sorry. You get a prize, but that's right. But they want those 2 states want them to be, of a psychological background, not necessarily doctors, but of a psychological background, because in the world of guardian ad litems, you get a continuing education, something or other, in family law. Well, that doesn't make you a psychologist. Let me give you a point of reference here, and a real life example. I was in the court-appointed psychologist office, wonderful lady. And she said, let's get the GAL on the telephone because this is just one of the worst cases of parental alienation I've ever seen, and this boy needs you badly. She puts on the speakerphone. She says, Mr. Salomonsky is here. The gentleman on the other end of the phone said, I'm sorry, I don't believe in parental alienation, and I will not submit anything to the judge about it. This wonderful doctor, wonderful lady said, she goes, sir, she goes, this is my background. I'm a psychologist. She goes, I don't pretend to be a lawyer. You don't pretend to be a psychologist. He hung up the phone. Anybody been there? Been there?
Done that.
Now, I told Victoria in the 70s, I wrote a paper called Deity Syndrome, and I had it basically to doctors because they never had a first name once they graduated school. Well, now I put it towards lawyers. They know how to fix your car, your plumbing, and they know all about psychiatry. It's an amazing thing. But this system that we have up is set up for it. And so what I've basically done, and I've been working also with another psychologist who used to do cases for the court, but he gave up on it because he said, these judges are idiots out there. It's just an awful thing. But I told him, I said, when we write a book about this, we're going to call it The Business of Children. And with attorneys, the children are the inventory to their little store. They play upon your emotion. You throw more money at me, we're going to fix this issue, because they know that you're devastated, especially if you're a man, because you're fighting the odds. Right. And this is abysmal. And so this is what we have. And one of the funny things is that industrial psychologists have determined that the 2 places that we human beings hate to go to are your own attorney and dentist. And there's a reason for it, because when you go to your own attorney or a dentist, we're not here about cavities right now, so we'll stick to attorneys, is they become rather, as my late mother used to say, they become rather bastified to you in their own office because they want to show this bravado. Whether they're male or female, they want to show bravado. I'm here to take care of you, and we're going to fight this way in court. Literally, with all of them that I went to, once they got into court, they became sheepish, like, yes, Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. There were very few, but to you, they were, and I realized after I went from having money in the bank to being poor, I said, you know what? I said, I just got a sales pitch. Now, the funny thing of it is that I actually, heard these guardian or lawyers say to me one time, they said, this is not my child. I have no empathy for you here. This is another case to me, and we're just following the rule of the law. Now, you sign here and you agree with me. Well, in the beginning, I was so damn scared. I said, I'll do whatever you say because I know that you really have my best interest of heart. I was chattel and I was used. So if there's any advice about the legal system right now, if anyone says this, please run. Please run. And I'm going to tell you why, and we'll break it down to the most simple things. As I've been a mental health therapist, I'm now a personal positive psychology coach, and I've been a retailer. I spent nights as a retailer making sure that when that person called me, they were saying, well, get the right thing for my wife for Christmas. If I can have emotion about finding the right gift for your wife, why in God's name can't a lawyer have a little bit of emotion for your child? It is a human being and it's not a parking ticket. So the system is not broken. It never worked properly to begin with. So therefore, it's like, I'm not sure how much if we recognize parental alienation, are we actually going to recognize this in the courtroom? Can I see a show of hand of judges? Do we have any judges here? Oh, none showed up. Well, you're a judge right there?
I'm a substitute judge.
Substitute? Well, you're close. Right church, wrong pew. Okay.
Yeah.
But, all right, but do you have a background in psychology?
I certainly have some dispute with what you're saying.
I fully expect that. Let me give you one from a judge. I had one attorney actually stand up one time because I had a great doctor with me, and we were ready to put him up. The judge looked and says, I don't need to listen to you. I took psychology in school. And I'm like, Psychology 101, and this guy is a noted psychiatrist? That defied all, things. So anyway, what we were left with here from a system is because you have a broken child, but you also break the family financially. It's very difficult when you really want to fight for a child, and all of a sudden you have nothing left, and then you worry about keeping the lights on, food in the refrigerators. And the fact of the matter is that when there's an 80-20 scenario to where there's gender bias in the system, you exacerbate and reinforce parental alienation. There's almost times where you say, I have to give up. But let me just conclude, because it's time for a rebuttal here, which I can smell it coming on, and you have a friend, okay, is this. We've got a scenario to where we break this cycle that we have in the court system, so people like Victoria and her cohorts can be heard, because this is a psychological morass here. There is no reason for a son like mine to have really almost died. He is a psychological morass because lawyers, GALs, and judges overlooked every piece of evidence. I just had the wrong genitalia in the city of Virginia Beach or the state of Virginia. And I went through a litany of lawyers, because if one lost, try another one, because there's no reason to create the same misery again. But there is no reason for a kid that had 140 IQ, was taken without warning, to now he has explosive disorder, general anxiety disorder, clinical depression, and he is an addict who almost died. He has been hospitalized 5 times. As his wonderfully well-noted and affirmed psychiatrist said to him, when my son had a breakdown in his office, bear in mind, he was taken at 4.5, he's now 20, I did not know the minutiae of the situation. I was called into the session in the office, and I see my son, who's now 6 feet tall, and he's crying like a baby. And I went, Dr. Blank, since he's not here, I can't say his name. I said, Dr. Blank, I said, what's going on? He says, I think that you need to hear this. He goes, your son finally revealed everything that happened the day he was taken. And when he was taken, my son said, where is my daddy? Why are all my toys in the car? And my ex-wife turned around, he was in his car seat, and she looked at me, she goes, your father doesn't want anything to do with you any longer. It was the first time that I heard that, but I suspected it. Now bear in mind, Your Honor, that when I was in court, I relayed a situation to where my son was beaten by my ex-wife. Not with the hands, not on the tuchus, but with a fist to his head. I was told by one of the honorable men in black, that is the worst story that I have ever heard. Mr. Salomonsky, you're the worst witness that I've ever had in this courtroom. I told it in detail. It should have been case closed at that particular point, and I couldn't believe that. Of course, I looked at the man's background, and he was a traffic guy before he knew all about family law. So anyway, the denouement of the story is if we don't change the system, there are going to be more kids like JR, and I just pray that my son lives, because the last thing that Dr. Blank said, it says, your son's behavior is predicated upon every action that his mother did to him, and he is using heroin to mask the behaviors and come to some sort of calm in life. And so when you've almost lost a child, and 4 weeks ago I was seeing an unconscious boy with tubes going in, out of him, in every way, shape, or form, I don't want that to happen to any of y'all, and let's change the system. Thank you for your time. If you have a question, please go right ahead.